Another matter of concern to a lot of Ghanaians is the Boko matter. Now, Dr. Boama admits the security situation in Boko and Alavanyo remains volatile. Now, Joy News Research Review, the defense budget has surged over 60%. Lead data and research analyst here at Joy News, Isaac Kofi Agyei, joins me in the studio as we go through the issue of the budget. We'll also be looking into the issue of recruitment and the unaccounted for ammunition when our guests join me in the studio to discuss the implications of this, especially those who've had some military training but will not be able to be enlisted into the Ghana Armed Force. What will come of them? Will they be added on to the already, serious situation of having people with military training but jobless, and then they are convinced into undertaking unlawful activities? We'll explore that and more. But first, let's talk about the defense budget. And Kofi is right here in the studio with me. So, Kofi, what do we have?
Well, Elton, usually they say that a well-functioning defense system is directly proportional to the expenditure.
Right.
The perfect example is the US and other countries like Russia and China, who spend significant components of their budgets on their military. When you come to
Ghana, the US, we're looking around 645 billion United States dollars.
That is a huge amount.
But that is the biggest. If you put Russia, China, and UK together, they still don't come anywhere near the US military spending.
So it means that they treat their defense with that sort of importance. And in Ghana, if you actually sample or look at the top 5 ministries or areas that we spend the most, definitely education health,
always number 1,
but defense will never leave when you're looking at the top 5. And in fact, in 2025 this year, the amount government wants to spend on defense is about 6.4 billion Ghana cedis. And if you take it to dollar terms, we're talking about, let's say, roughly $640 million. Compare that to how much US is spending on military. It means that there is more room for improvement, but definitely because of our population and other areas that we focus on. But the reason why we decided to look at this expenditure is because of what is happening in the northern part of the country. And the president's assurance that definitely there will be some 12,000 recruits this year. They are just waiting for the assurance and clearance from the finance ministry to go ahead with that. Now, we didn't just look at this figure in isolation. In terms of capital expenditure, if you listen to the defense minister, what you see is that the defense system of the country really lacks capital. Especially, he spoke about accommodation and what have you. And usually they depend on donor support to actually build some of these facilities and all of that. And if you look at this big figure, you may think that, well, 6.4 billion is huge. But about 89% of that goes into wages and salaries. So it means you have just about
11%.
Yeah, 11%
to take care of
capex, administrative cost, and all of that. That is woefully inadequate. So let's try and understand this more. The reason why this is important is that 64% increment we are seeing in the defense budget is relative to this 3.9 billion allocation we saw in 2024.
So there's been almost 100% increment.
Absolutely. And we have been doing the math, and what you see is that the average has been around, let's say, some 38% increments almost every year. But this time around, we are doing 64% increment in the defense budget. And that is definitely an outlier. We did same in 2023, it was around 68%. But this is how the country's defense budgeting has been like since 2016. And definitely you see this 2025 figure being unprecedented. 6.4 billion is what you see there. Now, in terms of the northern part of the country, the reason why that is important is that there is that northern security. I'm talking about the border security that the government allocates a certain amount of money to every year. Last year was around 200 million Ghana cedis. But this year, we understand that although defense budget will be around 6.4 billion Ghana cedis, just about 100 million Ghana cedis will go to the northern border security as a budgetary allocation. That is 100% slash from what we saw in 2024. But the most important thing is that significantly, 84 or 89% of the 6.4 billion defense budget will
go into the payment of salaries.
Go into the payment of salaries and wages.
So how do they take care of equipment, infrastructure development, and the other things that come to make, you know, our defense quite tight.
Now you're talking about CAPEX, right? And definitely if you look at this data, it simply tells you that CAPEX allocation is very, very small. So usually governments would depend on donor supports, right? And programs from other multilateral and bilateral arrangements to actually close some of these gaps. So in years that we are not able to attract some of these monies or funding, our defense system, it becomes a bit, you know, exposed in terms of CAPEX, not in terms of its, you know, strength or what have you. But in terms of the budgetary allocation, when it comes to CAPEX and other accoutrements, usually it is from donor support and some bilateral and multilateral arrangements. And definitely, we are hoping that this year we could get more. But the bad news is that we all know what is happening in the U.S., where budgetary allocation to African countries have been reduced.
Right.
Even the UN, for instance, is battling with a slash in terms of its budget because of the decision that the US has taken. And so it will be interesting to see how we are going to fare this year. But the most important thing is that we possibly need to close that gap when it comes to CAPEX expenditure, because this data tells you that about 89%, let's say 90%
going into
our budgetary
payment of salary. But I'm curious to know, you know, we've got the mid-year review coming up. Do you have the sense that perhaps government may be asking for more money to spend? Because in fact, I've been speaking to some state institutions, the heads of state institutions. For example, the scholarship secretariat, for example. And the information I get is that they only spend after the presentation of the mid-year budget. Does it indicate that perhaps government will be asking for more money to spend? That's the reason why some state institutions have been asked to put all programs on hold until after the presentation of the mid-year review.
The reason why we are seeing it in this form is that government really wanted to use the first 6 months of the year to test how the economy will go.
Right.
Now we understand that the city, is stable. We've seen fuel prices coming down. Inflation is now around 13% and all of that. This is a good assurance for government to go into the mid-year budget and possibly start spending. Because we understand the reason why BOG held that emergency monetary policy meeting was to consolidate and then also look at the broader data and give it to government to inform the decision that the finance ministry was going to look.
Right.
So the projection is that starting from we're already in the second half of the year, but after the mid-year budget, the projection is that expenses will start coming in, government will start expending. Already the president says that they have the assurance and clearance from the Ministry of Finance to start employing more people, not just in the defense side, but in other areas. And so government will go ahead to do more expenditure, possibly in the second half of the year, especially after they have seen how the data has fared in terms of government expenditure and all of that. And many have said that the reason why you have inflation coming down and the city performing well is that government has been very, very tight and fiscally disciplined in terms of what they want to spend. It's also important to know that in terms of even arrears, you have about 62 billion sitting on the books of government as arrears clearance that they need to pay. We understand that most of this amount of money has not been paid. It's just the road sector that has enjoyed some 4 billion in allocation. The analogy or the projection is that after the mid-year budget, government will go ahead to spend, and we will see how the economy will respond.
Thank you very much for coming through. But, you know, me and you have been looking at the Auditor General's report for 2024 that was just released, and already the figures we are seeing doesn't call for comfort.
I mean, in fact, we are talking about 18.4 billion Ghana cedis. That's about 1.8 billion US dollars. In financial irregularities, and significant component of that came from the energy sector. And again, ECG was in the mix. It will be interesting to see how that will also go. But we'll bring you all the updates and every data that's actually in the latest Auditor General's report.
Thank you very much, Kofi, for coming through, and of course.